a widow in a clapboard house at the edge of a dying frontier town, slid the last loaf of bread she owned across her kitchen table to a starving young man she had never seen before. The loaf was 4 days old. The crust had gone hard. She had baked it on a Sunday from the bottom of her flour barrel, and she had been rationing it slice by slice for herself and the hen she had not yet eaten. The young man had knocked on her door at sundown with cracked lips and a coat the color of road dust and eyes that had not seen a kind face in 200 miles. She gave him the bread. She gave him a tin cup of well water. She gave him the chair her dead husband had sat in for 19 years. She did not ask his name. He did not give it. 30 years later, a column of riders came up the wagon road in front of that same house, 200 head of cattle behind them, and a Stetson tilted against the sun at the front. And the man under that Stetson stepped down out of his saddle and looked at the porch where an old woman was sitting with her hands folded. And what happened next is the reason I am telling you this story. Stay with me on this one. Her name was Mary Holloway, 34 years old in the spring of 1866. She was the widow of a man named Thomas Holloway, who had ridden out of their cabin in the spring of '64 to join up with the Union infantry and had not ridden home. The letter had come from a chaplain in Atlanta in the fall of '65. Thomas was buried in a field outside a town she had never heard of. She had folded the letter and put it in the family Bible and gone out to feed the chickens, and she had not cried in the kitchen because she did not want her hen to see. They had no children. By the spring of '66, she had stopped praying for one. The town was called Cottonwood Bend. It sat on a bend of a sluggish river in what was then the western edge of the Kansas Territory, about 120 miles from anywhere a person might have heard of. Population 190. Most of them were homesteaders who had come out before the war and stayed, because they had nowhere better to go. Mary's clapboard house sat at the very edge of town, on a strip of land Thomas had bought from a Cheyenne trader for a saddle and $4 in 1858. 40 acres. A creek at the back. A stand of cottonwoods. A chicken coop with 5 hens. A barn with a milk cow named Bess and a gray mare named Daisy. A small grave near the cottonwoods where Mary had buried 2 stillborn babies in the years before the war. Thomas's mother had taught Mary one thing the first week she had moved into the house as a bride, and Mary had carried it every day since. You do not turn a hungry traveler away from your door. You do not count what it costs you. The cost is not the bread. The cost was never the bread. Thomas's mother had said it the way her own mother had said it, back in a sod house in Iowa, where the door had not been closed on a hungry stranger once. Mary was carrying that lesson the evening the young man knocked. It was a Tuesday in late April. The sun was a finger's width above the prairie. Mary was at the back stoop, wringing the neck of a chicken she had finally given up on. The hen was a poor layer and old, and Mary had stretched the flour barrel as far as it would stretch, and the smokehouse had nothing in it but a hook. She killed the bird that evening because she had to eat. The knock came from the front of the house. She walked through the kitchen and across the front room and put her hand on the door latch. She did not have a gun. Thomas had taken his rifle to the war. She had a kitchen knife in her apron pocket. She opened the door. He was leaning against the porch post. Maybe 19 years old. Tall. His coat was a thin canvas duster, the color of road dust, with a tear at the elbow mended with twine. His boots were split at the seams. His hat had gone the color of bone. His face was burned dark. The skin on his lips had cracked open in 3 places. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had walked a long way without enough water in him. He did not have a horse. He had walked. He took the hat off and held it in both hands. "Ma'am, I beg your pardon. I saw the smoke from your chimney. I have not eaten anything since the day before yesterday. I am not asking for charity. I will chop wood. I will pull stumps. I will mend fence. I will work for whatever scrap you have got." She read his face the way Thomas's mother had taught her. He was a boy who had been on the road too long. "Where have you come from?" "Missouri, ma'am." "Below Independence. The war took my father and 2 of my brothers. The bank took the rest. My mother passed in the winter. I have been walking west since the thaw. I am trying to get to Stage Station in Colorado." She looked at his hands. They were cracked. There was an old scar across the back of his right thumb. She stood aside. "Come in. Sit down." "Ma'am, I do not want to put you out." "You are not putting me out. Sit down." He stepped over the threshold like a man stepping into a church. He sat in the chair Thomas had sat in for 19 years, the rocker by the cold stove, and he did not lean back into it. He sat on the edge of it. Mary went to the kitchen. She had been planning the chicken. She had been planning to pluck it and stew it slow with the last turnip and 1 onion. She looked at the chicken on the chopping block. She looked at the loaf of bread on the table. The loaf was wrapped in a cloth her mother had embroidered in 1844. It was the last loaf in the house. She had baked it on Sunday from the bottom of the flour barrel. The barrel was empty now. There would be no more flour until the general store got its next shipment from Independence, which the storekeeper had said would be 3 weeks, maybe 4. She picked up the bread. She brought it into the front room. She brought the cloth too. She brought a tin cup and a pitcher of well water and a small dish of butter she had been hoarding since Easter. She set them on the side table next to the rocker. "Eat." "Ma'am, I cannot take your bread." "It is not your decision. It is mine. The bread is on the table." "Eat." "Are there others in the house?" "It is me. Only me." "Then, ma'am, I really cannot." "You can. You will. Sit there. I will be back in a minute." She walked back to the kitchen. She picked up the chicken. She walked out the back door and set the chicken back on its feet in the yard. The hen blinked and walked off toward the coop on legs that were not quite working right. She would not eat that night. The hen would lay 1 more egg in the morning. The egg would be hers. She came back inside. The boy was standing in the middle of the front room. "Ma'am, if you do not have anything else, I will not eat your bread. I am telling you to sit down and eat. My mother-in-law taught me what a person does when somebody hungry comes to her door, and she did not teach me how to argue with a starving boy in my own front room. So sit down and eat." He sat. She poured the water into the tin cup. She unwrapped the bread. She cut him a slice with the knife from her apron pocket. She spread the butter on it thin so it would last. She set it on the dish from the side table and put the dish in his hand. His hand was shaking, the way a man's hand shakes when he has not had anything in his belly for 40 hours, and now there is food 2 inches from his mouth, and he is not entirely sure his stomach will hold it. "Slow," she said. "You will be sick if you eat it fast." He ate it slow. He ate that slice and another. He drank 2 tin cups of water. She cut him a 3rd slice, and he started to refuse, and she said, "No, eat." The color came back into the edges of his face. She did not eat. She sat across from him on the bench by the window and folded her hands in her lap and watched him eat, and she did not ask him a single question while he ate, because she had learned a long time ago that men do not like to be asked questions when they are eating their first meal in 2 days. When he had finished the 3rd slice, he folded the cloth napkin she had given him, like a child taught to fold his napkin after supper. "Ma'am, I do not know your name." "Mary Holloway." "Mary Holloway," he nodded once. "I will not forget that. What is your name, son?" He looked at her for a long second. Cole. Cole Branham. From Independence, Missouri. Cole Branham. You have a place to sleep tonight, Cole Branham. No, ma'am. There is a barn out back. There is hay in the loft. The cow is a quiet one. The mare, too. There is a wool blanket in the loft I kept there in case Thomas needed it for a calving. You can sleep up there tonight. In the morning, I will pack you what I can spare, and you can be on your way. Mary Holloway. Why? She thought about it. She did not have a quick answer. Because you knocked on my door. And the door opened. He stayed in the loft that night. In the morning, she gave him what she could spare. Half the rest of the loaf, wrapped in the embroidered cloth. A small pouch of dried beans. A pinch of salt twisted into wax paper. The tin cup. A small folding knife of Thomas's he had kept in the kitchen drawer for 19 years. A wool sock with 3 silver dollars in the toe. He stood on the porch with the bundle in his hand and the hat in his other hand. Mary Holloway. I will pay this back. I do not know how. I do not know when. But I will. Son, there is nothing to pay back. The bread is not mine. The bread goes through me. I held it for a minute. Now you hold it. One day you pass it on. He did not understand. She could see it in his face. You will, she said. One day. You will. He walked off west down the wagon road in his split boots, with the bundle over his shoulder. She watched him until the road dipped past the cottonwoods and he was out of sight. Then she went back inside and shut the door and went to the kitchen and looked at the empty flour barrel. She did not cry. She had not cried since the chaplain's letter. She walked out to the coop and looked at the hen and said, "Lay me one more egg, old girl, and we will both call it even." The hen laid an egg the next morning. That is the thing about a kindness done quiet. You do not keep a list. You do not memorize the face. You forget. Mary forgot Cole Branham by the time the snow came that fall. 30 years went by. In those 30 years, a great deal of the country changed, and a great deal of Mary Holloway did not. The railroad came up from Wichita in the late 70s and missed Cottonwood Bend by 12 miles. The schoolhouse closed in 83. The river ran lower every summer. Mary aged. She did not remarry. She kept the chickens. Bess died of old age in 79. Daisy the gray mare went lame in 81, and Mary had to put her down with the colt of Thomas's brother. She buried Daisy in the cottonwood grove next to the 2 stillborn babies, and she went on. She got by thin. There were winters she lived on cornmeal mush and turnips for 3 months. She sold Thomas's wedding ring to a peddler 1 year for $9. She took in mending. She sold eggs into town. She sold honey from a pair of hives she kept under the cottonwoods. By the spring of 1896, Mary was 64. Her hair was white. Her hands arthritic. Her left hip pained her every step. There was a cow named me in the lot. There was no horse. And then on a Thursday in late April, the men in suits came. There were 3 of them. They drove up the wagon road in a black lacquered carriage with a matched team of bays. They were from Topeka. They worked for a syndicate called Western Plains Land and Cattle Company. A spur of the Santa Fe Railroad was coming up from Wichita and was going to cross the river right at the bend of Mary's Creek, and the syndicate intended to lay out a railhead town. They had bought 11 of the 12 plots they needed. The 12th was Mary's 40 acres. They came up the porch steps in city boots that had never seen a stirrup. The lead man's name was Havers. Tall, clean-shaven, gold watch chain across his vest. The 2 behind him were a clerk and a man Mary suspected was an attorney. Mrs. Holloway, "Mr. Havers, may we come inside? You may stand on the porch. There is a bench." They sat on the porch. Mary sat in Thomas's old rocker. She did not offer them water. Havers put a piece of paper on the small porch table. "Mrs. Holloway, we are prepared to offer $420 for the entire 40 acres. She read the paper. 40 acres of creek bottom land at the bend of a river where a railroad was about to cross was worth, in 1896, somewhere north of $3,000. She was old. She was not a fool. She slid the paper back. "No, Mrs. Holloway, the railroad is coming. The town will be built. Whether you sell now and walk away with something, or hold out and walk away with nothing, the town is coming." "No." The attorney leaned forward. His voice was softer. "That was worse. There are also some matters with your deed. Your husband purchased this plot from a Cheyenne man in 1858. We are not entirely satisfied that the chain of title is complete. If the matter went to a court, the outcome would not be certain. It might cost you everything." Mary's hands were on the arms of the rocker. "You boys want anything else? Or are you done?" "Mrs. Holloway, my cow needs milking." They left the paper on the porch table. They tipped their hats. They got back in the lacquered carriage, and the matched bays took them down the road in a cloud of dust. They came back twice that week. The number went down each time. By the end of May, Havers was offering $310. The county recorder, a man named Pritchard who had known Thomas before the war, sent Mary a letter. The syndicate had filed papers questioning the title. There was going to be a hearing in Topeka in October. Pritchard said he believed Mary had a good claim. He also said Topeka was Topeka, and the syndicate had 3 lawyers and Mary had none. A surveyor came out unannounced and stuck stakes along the back of Mary's creek. Mary pulled them up and threw them in the creek. A week later, 3 more stakes appeared. The third time, the surveyor's man stood at the property line with a sidearm on his hip and watched her pull stakes for an hour and did not put them back. By the second week of June, Mary was not sleeping. She sat up nights in the rocker with the colt in her lap. She lost weight. The hen with the bad leg died, and Mary did not have it in her to bury it that day. She had forgotten the boy with the bread entirely. She had forgotten his name within a year. His face within 5. That was a Tuesday. Saturday morning, the cattle came. It was just before noon. The day was hot. The cottonwoods along the creek were full of cicadas. Mary was on the porch shelling peas into a chipped enamel bowl. The first sound was a low rumble down the wagon road. The way distant thunder sounds when a storm has not yet decided whether to come or pass. Mary lifted her head. The rumble grew. It separated into hoofbeats. It separated into the lowing of cattle. It separated into the voices of men. She set the bowl on the porch and stood up. The lead riders came around the bend. 6 of them, 2 abreast, riding at an easy walk. Behind them, a swell of cattle. Fat red and white steers, healthy, well-watered. Behind the herd, more riders. Mary counted 12 men, and somewhere north of 200 head of beef. The lead rider raised a hand. The column stopped 100 yards out. The cattle slowed and spread and began to crop the prairie grass along the road. One rider came forward. He was tall in the saddle. Older, maybe 50. A broad black Stetson tilted against the sun. A dark vest over a clean white shirt. He sat his horse easy, with reins held loose in his left hand. He rode up to the front of Mary's house and stopped. He swung down. He walked the last 20 feet, leading the horse by the bridle. He stopped at the foot of her porch steps. He took the hat off. He held it against his chest in both hands. His hair had gone silver. There was a long scar across the back of his right thumb. His eyes were the same eyes. Mary Holloway. His voice was lower than it had been. Tennessee in it now, layered over Missouri. Mary stood very still. She did not know him. She did not remember the face. But the way a body remembers a thing the mind has put away. Her hand had gone to her apron without her telling it to. The way her hand had gone to the apron the day she had cut a slice of bread for a stranger in a torn duster. Yes, my name is Cole Branham. We met in this house in the spring of 1866. You fed me a slice of bread. I do not. I figured you would not. I tried to come back sooner. I sent a letter from Abilene in 73. It never reached you. I came up the road with 3 men in 81. The house was empty. A neighbor said you had gone east for the winter. I got as far as Wichita in 91. My foreman was thrown from a horse and broke his neck, and I turned back to bury him. I am sorry it took me 30 years to keep my word. Mary's hands had gone to the rail of the porch. She held the rail. Mr. Branham. Mr. Branham was my father. Cole, if you would. I owe you that. Cole. Yes, ma'am. You. Yes, ma'am. She sat down. She did not mean to. Her legs sat her down. She looked at him over the porch rail. You ate my bread. I did. I got to Colorado. The stage station job did not pan out. I worked for a freight outfit out of Pueblo for 2 seasons. Then I went down into the New Mexico territory and signed on as a hand with a cattleman named Eustace Reed. He had no children. He taught me the trade. He died in 72 and left me half his outfit on paper. I bought the other half from his widow over the next 4 years. I have been working it since. How big? He paused. 220,000 acres, ma'am. About 32,000 head of beef under my brand. A dozen outfits work for me. A line of contracts with the railroad in Kansas City. They call me a name in the newspapers that I do not care for. They call me the Cowboy King of the Cimarron. I am not a king. I am a man who got fed a slice of bread in 1866 by a woman who did not know my name. The rest is just cattle. Mary did not say anything. He took a small bundle out of his saddlebag. He came up the porch steps with it. He set it on the porch table next to the chipped enamel bowl. He unwrapped it. Inside was a piece of cloth. White embroidered. The corner of it was stained brown the way old cloth stains. There was a small mended tear at one edge. In the middle, in faded blue thread, was a small initial M, the way her mother had embroidered her wedding linens in Iowa in 1844. You wrapped half a loaf of bread in that and gave it to me on a Wednesday morning in April of 66. I have carried it in my saddlebag every day since. There is not a town between Mexico and the Dakotas I have not carried that cloth through. Mary put a hand over her mouth. She did not know she was crying until she felt it on her wrist. If you are with me on this story, and I really hope you are, because the next part is the part that is going to stay with you for a long while, do me a kindness and tap that subscribe button down there. The channel is full of stories like this. Stories about quiet things done in dark rooms by tired people who never expected anybody to come back. Stories about the long way home. Subscribe. Stick around. Cole Branham is about to do something for Mary Holloway that she has not let herself hope for in 3 months, and she does not know it yet. Back to the porch. Cole pulled a chair from inside the front room. He carried it out and set it next to the rocker and sat down. He held the Stetson in his lap. Mary. Yes. I rode into Cottonwood Bend this morning before the sun was up. I had breakfast at the boarding house. The woman who runs it is named Bertha Klein. I know Bertha. Bertha told me about the railroad and the syndicate. She told me a widow named Mary Holloway was the only holdout, and the syndicate was going to take her plot at a hearing in Topeka in October come what may. She said the widow had fed half the homesteaders in the county at one time or another. I drank my coffee. I rode out here. I saw a stake by the back of your creek inside your fence line, and a second along the south wall of your barn. I pulled both up on my way in. They are in my saddlebag. I will return them to Mr. Havers personally. With words, Mary almost laughed. The laugh got caught in her throat. Cole, you cannot. Mary, he looked at her steady. I came up here for 2 reasons. The first was to find the woman who fed me a slice of bread and to thank her. That reason I have answered. I am sitting on the porch of her house. I am looking at her face. The second reason will not be talked about until you say one thing, and one thing only. Are you willing to sell this plot to Western Plains Land and Cattle Company? Yes or no? No. All right. That is the only thing I needed to hear. He stood up. He went down the porch steps. He raised a hand to the column on the road. 2 of the lead riders broke off and rode up at an easy lope. One was a younger man in a tan vest. The other was an older man with a heavy mustache and a leather portfolio strapped behind his cantle. Mary, Cole said, this is Jim Pickett. He runs my Kansas outfit. And this is Lawrence Goodall. Mr. Goodall is my attorney. He came up from Trinidad. He has been an attorney for 23 years. He is good at it. The men touched their hats. Mr. Goodall unstrapped the leather portfolio. Cole came back up the porch steps and sat again. Mary, this is what is going to happen if you will allow it. Mr. Goodall is going to ride into Cottonwood Bend this afternoon. He's going to file a defensive title on your property, on my dime. There is no question about the title, Mary. The syndicate's claim is a paper claim. It would have worked because you did not have an attorney. You have one now. Mary opened her mouth. Cole held up a hand. That is not all. Mr. Goodall is going to ride to Topeka on the noon train Monday. He is going to inform Mr. Havers that the Branham Cattle Company of the Cimarron Strip is, as of yesterday afternoon, the majority shareholder in the bond issue that the Western Plains Land and Cattle Company floated last August to finance the railhead project. We bought it through 3 intermediaries. I did not know it was the same syndicate until Bertha told me the name this morning. The Lord works that way sometimes. Cole, hold on. Mr. Havers is going to be told that the plot of Mary Holloway is not for sale, not for $400, not for $4,000, not for $400,000. He is going to be asked whether his syndicate would prefer to do business with the new majority bondholder cordially, in which case your plot sits untouched and the railhead gets built around it. Or uncordially, in which case the bond is called, the syndicate is foreclosed inside 90 days, every man on its board is sued individually for fraud, and Mr. Havers personally spends the next 4 years answering questions in a federal court in Wichita. I have already paid the retainer. Mary stared at him. On your side, the following. The 40 acres your husband bought from a Cheyenne man in 1858 are yours, free and clean, forever. The deed will be cleared by Tuesday. The taxes you have paid out of egg money and honey money for 30 years are going to be reimbursed to you, with interest. The barn is going to be rebuilt. The roof reshingled. The well cleaned. I am sending up 4 Hereford heifers and a milking cow from my Kansas string. He paused. And one more thing. He turned. He nodded to Mr. Goodall. Mr. Goodall stepped up on the porch. He set a folded square of parchment on the porch table next to the embroidered cloth. He unfolded it. It was a deed. Cole did not look at the deed. He looked at Mary. Mary, my outfit owns the next 200 acres east of your fence line. Good grass. Watered. The deed in front of you transfers full title of those 200 acres to one Mary Holloway of Cottonwood Bend, with no encumbrance and no payment due, in perpetuity. The transfer is being made in honor of a debt the company's owner contracted in April of 1866. Mary did not move. Mary, you will have 240 acres. You will have cattle on them. You will have men who answer to my brand who answer to you while I am alive and to my heirs after me. You will not pay another tax bill out of egg money. You will not pull another stake from your fence. The county recorder will be looking at a list of properties under the protection of the Branham Cattle Company, and the first name on that list will be Mary Holloway, and no man with a portfolio will ever walk up that wagon road again unless he is bringing you eggs. Mary's hand was on the embroidered cloth. She could not feel her own fingers. Cole. Why? He sat back. He looked out at the cottonwoods. The cicadas had quieted. Me load in the lot. In the spring of '66, ma'am, I walked up to your door because I had seen the smoke from your chimney, and I had not had a meal in 2 days. I had a knife in my pocket I had told myself I was going to use if you turned me away. I was 19. I had buried my father and 2 brothers. I had buried my mother in February. The bank had taken our place. I was alone in the world in a way that does not have a word for it. I was going to ask for a scrap. I was going to take it if it was not given. And you opened the door and you said, "Come in and sit down." He took a breath. You gave me a slice of buttered bread. I learned later from a woman in town that you had been rationing that loaf for yourself for 4 days. You gave me a place to sleep. You gave me a knife of your husband's. You gave me $3 silver in a sock you had been saving for a winter coat you never bought. And in the morning, you said the bread is not yours. The bread goes through you. You hold it for a minute. One day you pass it on. And then you said you will. One day. You will. He looked at her. Mary, I went west, and I made a life that nobody who saw me on your porch that morning would have predicted. I have fed a great many men since. I have buried 4 orphans on my own dollar. I have done what I could to pass the bread. But there was always one debt that did not get passed. I owed that one to you. I have come to pay it. The wind moved again. The cottonwoods sounded like a creak. Mary picked up the cloth. She held it in her 2 old hands. The embroidered M faced her, faded but plain. She set the cloth back down on the table. She put her hand on the deed. Cole Branham. Yes, ma'am. You owe me nothing. You never did. The bread was not mine. I know it. That is what makes it mine to pay forward. Sign the deed, Mary. Let an old man sleep tonight. She signed the deed on the porch table, with Mr. Goodall holding the inkwell, and the cicadas loud again. She signed her name the way Thomas had taught her, slow and full, Mary E. Holloway. She cried a little when she signed. Cole did not cry. Cole had finished crying in a bunkhouse in the Cimarron Strip on a winter night in '76, when he had finally believed he was going to live. Mr. Goodall rode into Cottonwood Bend that afternoon. By Tuesday evening, the title of the original 40 acres was clean. By the end of the month, the syndicate's letters stopped. The stakes were gone by summer. The railhead was built 3/4 of a mile north of Mary's Creek. Mary's plot was untouched. The barn was rebuilt. The roof reshingled. The Hereford heifers came up in July. Cole rode south the day after the deed was signed. He came back twice a year for the rest of his life. He sat in Thomas's old rocker every visit. He brought her real coffee in a tin she did not have to ration. He brought her a young black mare in '98 that she named Daisy after the first Daisy. Mary Holloway lived to be 83. She raised 3 orphans she took in over the years on the land Cole Branham deeded her. The third was a thin boy who walked up the wagon road in split boots in 1901 with a torn coat and a hat the color of bone. And when Mary opened the door, she did not say a word for a full minute, because for half that minute, he had looked just enough like Cole Branham at 19 that she had thought the Lord had folded time in half. His name was Samuel. He was 12. She fed him a slice of bread with butter. He stayed. When Mary died in the winter of 1915, she was buried in the cottonwood grove next to Thomas's empty grave. Cole Branham was 78, but he came up on the noon train from Trinidad and stood at the graveside in a black wool suit with the embroidered cloth folded in his inside pocket. He had carried that cloth for 49 years. He buried it in the dirt over her coffin before they filled in the grave. He said to nobody but himself in the cottonwoods, "The bread keeps going." Some kindnesses are loud. They get newspaper columns. They get statues. They get a column of horsemen riding up the wagon road in front of a clapboard house on a Saturday morning, while 200 head of cattle stand on the prairie behind them, and an old woman cries on her porch. This was mostly the other kind. The quiet kind. A widow with a flour barrel down to the bottom, slicing a piece of bread for a boy in a torn coat on a Tuesday evening in 1866. A boy walking off west the next morning with a wool sock of silver dollars and 3 words he did not understand. A long line of women in aprons on a long line of porches handing food to strangers and asking for nothing back and getting nothing back for a generation. And once in a long while, when the woman has stopped expecting it, the bread comes home. You do not always see where your kindness lands. You hand a stranger a slice of bread. You forget. You go back to shelling peas on a porch in the heat of a Kansas afternoon. But the bread keeps going. And once in a long, long while, on a Saturday morning 30 years out, you look up from the porch and the bread is riding up the wagon road at the head of a column of horsemen with a Stetson tilted against the sun. And the bread has come home.